and welcome to Cahnmann's Current Event Roundtable. I'm Suzanne Cahnmann, and I have two very exciting guests today. First of all, we want to welcome back Michael Zanto, our political analyst, and hello, Michael.
Hi.
And welcome back again. For how many times? We've seen each other a couple of times on our different shows. And we have a very outstanding guest as well with Michael today, is Sergei Isakov, who's he's the news host of New Horizons Radio. That's Russian radio, 1240 AM WSBC. And welcome, Sergei.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to have an interesting discussion on Russian politics. And so it's going to be the United States versus Russia, or it's going to be Russia versus the United States. And I want to start off with a question, and I'm going to let these guys go at it. So, this is how it begins. Too many Americans mistakenly believe that Russia's leaders are incorrigibly anti-democratic and bent on bludgeoning Russia's neighbors, blackmailing Europeans, and causing trouble for the United States. And Russia's leaders have allowed their suspicion of Washington to fester to the point where they now view almost anything the United States government does, from promoting the construction of oil and gas pipelines out of the Caspian Sea region to supporting civil society in states that neighbor Russia, as part of a conscious and coherent strategy to weaken Moscow. Is mistrust of one another, is that the primary reason what's going on today? And it begins to sour over such issues as NATO enlargement, the status of Kosovo, and Washington's plans to place a ballistic missile defense system in Central Europe. Guys, we have a lot to talk about today, and I think one of our biggest things is the mistrust on each other.
Well, I think that we should first consider the fact that the Russian government was just involved a few years back in attempted assassination of a presidential candidate in Ukraine. There was the murder with polonium poisoning of a former FSB KGB agent in London. There is actually reason to not entirely trust the Russian government. The Wall Street Journal editorial board has many times said that most likely it was Russian agents responsible for the bombing of apartment buildings in Moscow that were blamed on Chechnyan terrorists. So if this is a government that is able to be involved in the murder of its own citizens, would murder somebody in London with polonium, which could be interpreted as nuclear terrorism, and would attempt to murder a presidential candidate of Ukraine who fortunately survived in order to influence the elections in a neighboring state, Ukraine, then I think that there is legitimate reasons not entirely to trust the Russian government.
Okay, Sergei, I'd like you to answer. Michael.
I would like to begin my comments from basically correcting the topic of our discussion. You said America versus Russia, or Russia versus America.
Right, and trust
so
and
I
mistrust.
would like to correct the topic. I mean, why wouldn't we say America with alliance with Russia, doing something altogether, trying to improve relationships which were broken big time under the presidency of George W. Bush, and this was a very sad fact.
I totally agree that we
yeah.
need to work together with the Russians. It's not a U.S. versus Russian thing. As you know, some people in Russia particularly are very distrustful of Americans beyond any legitimate concern. I think a responsible Russian government would help their people understand that it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, Russian leaders need to ensure that their people are, do not think that the United States is out to get Russia. I know that we have differences of opinions. We might sometimes have differences of interest. But definitely the world situation today is not Russia versus the United States. That was a fallacy of Marxism.
But we just got, our President Obama just went to Russia, and he pledges with the president of Russia, which is, I let you pronounce his name.
Medvedev.
That's very, yeah.
Medvedev.
Okay.
Dmitry Medvedev.
Okay, good, because I know you could say it better than I can. And both men renewed pledges to pull U.S.-Russian relations out of its dismal state. Do you think that we can can we become friends? Remember, at one time Russia was our friend, then it became our enemy, then it became our friend, and then it became our enemy again.
They were a lot more independent when oil prices hit
right.
150.
So we need to strengthen that relationship.
Let me put it this way. We can and we should. And basically, there's no other way. There's only one way. We need to do something about it, and we need to, do something fast. And personally, I was very optimistic while watching Obama's recent visit to Moscow. He spent just 2 days. And basically, he was the first president which was met with higher expectations than usual. And we need to basically resolve this problem of mutual distrust. This problem is stemming back from the old Soviet days when, if you remember, the whole world was split between the two empires, the U.S. empire and the Soviet Union communist empire.
The United States was not an empire. The United States was never an empire.
Well, I may actually argue this statement, but during the Cold War, I mean, basically the entire world was the battleground between the two systems, if you remember.
That was fueled by an ideological thing on the part of Marxism that saw it as a clash that was inevitable between basically the communists and the
That's exactly right.
capitalists.
So the United States for more than, I would say, 40 years, because don't forget that we were allies during the Second World War until 1945, then until the famous speech made in Fulton by Winston Churchill. When we started the Cold War.
The Iron Curtain had fallen. The Russians had basically put Eastern Europe under its occupation, which was brutal and enforced by a very oppressive regime.
Well,
but guys, don't we? I mean, we really have to focus on, we know what happened as far as history, but right now it's critical that we start to have a dialogue with Russia.
It's not actually totally, I disagree.
Because over the Iranian threat and exploring closer cooperation of Afghanistan, I think that's really the point
it's important
that
to
we
realize
need to really focus on right now.
That Russia should not have a veto over American foreign policy. So on the issue of Milosevic, when he was massacring Muslims both in Bosnia and Kosovo, and even in regards to Saddam Hussein, this wasn't just a problem in the Bush administration, this was a problem in the Clinton administration. Russia is not really, in most regards, a superpower, and many Russians want to be one, but they're not. And we should not engage in a policy where we seek the approval. We need to have respectful relations. But if the idea of disrespect is whenever we do something that the Russians don't agree with, this is not proper. There are many countries in the world that we have to work with, many allies. Russia is, and I hope continues to be, an ally. But we can't accept the idea that we have to go to Russia for the approval of all of our policies.
Michael, well, I would agree. You referred to several stories, especially about this ex-KGB guy being poisoned in London. Then this story about Ukrainian, president, which was poisoned allegedly by KGB, by FSB. However, I mean, it still has yet to be proved. But this is not the point.